I want to welcome y'all to the September 2021 VMware TAM customer webinar. This webinar is organized by the VMware TAM organization to provide you, our TAM customers, the opportunity to hear great content, interact directly with great speakers to make sure that you're getting the full benefit from your software entitlements. Before we get into today's content, just a couple of basic announcements. As most of you probably know, VMworld is coming up at just next month. And so be sure and spend some time looking at the content catalog, which is live, so that you can be ready September 6th when the schedule builder feature goes live. Get signed up for the sessions that are interesting to you. As you see on the intro slide, we've got a great session planned for next month where we're going to be learning about one of our recent acquisitions, the SaltStack product. And for today, please make use of the Q&A feature of Zoom. Ask any questions during the webinar and we'll do our best to get those addressed. If for some reason your question doesn't get addressed today, be sure and reach out to your TAM and ask them to follow up on your behalf. At the end of today's session, you will be prompted to fill out a simple 2-question survey related to the value you receive from this session and any topic suggestions for future sessions. Your completion of this survey is a very valuable gift back to us to know whether we're providing the type of content that you are interested in. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded and your TAM can make the recording link available to you. All of our recordings get posted to our VMware TAM Services YouTube channel, at first privately, and then after a few months, they become publicly available. All right, we've got a great group of speakers joining us today to discuss how you can use the VMware HCX solution to move your workloads between various clouds. Hopefully you'll come away from today's session with a greater understanding of how this solution can benefit you in your multi-cloud deployments. And so, Phoebe, I'll turn it over to you and your team.
All right, thank you, Andy. Thank you so much for having us. So today our focus, as Andy mentioned, will be on VMware HCX and helping you achieve workload mobility across different VMware clouds. So agenda for today, we'll start with a quick overview of what is VMware Cloud and what is VMware HCX. So we just kind of have a quick level set of where what the products are, and then just kind of go straight into demos. And of course, any questions that you might have, we'd be happy to answer. So first off, what is VMware Cloud? So VMware Cloud is a portfolio to help organizations with their multi-cloud or even hybrid cloud journey, right? So the idea is that with VMware Cloud, we want you to be able to build, run, manage, connect, and protect any application on any cloud. So as you can see, we have VMware, obviously, but we also have partnerships and joint solutions with a lot of different public cloud providers to bring you that ability to go into multi-cloud or hybrid cloud as you choose, or as it fits your organization's needs. So VMware Cloud is based on VMware Cloud Foundation, or VCF, if you have or is familiar with that in the on-premises data center. So with that comes the full stack of VMware virtualization products, right? For compute, we have EXXi and vSphere. Storage, we have vSAN. Network, we have NSX. So all of that also being automated and operated, I guess, for day 2 ops with vRealize Suite, vRealize Automation, maybe you have vRealize Operations, to help you maintain that kind of consistency across the different VMware environments. So it's based off of VCF. And of course, you have the vCenter at the management layer, and that makes up that software-defined data center, or SDDC. Now, that whole SDDC can be on, honestly, any of your preferred public cloud provider. We have VMware Cloud on AWS that uses AWS hardware. We have the Azure VMware Solution, Google Cloud VMware Engine, Oracle Cloud VMware Solution, and more. So with these hyperscale solutions, it's very easy for the organizations to move to the public cloud if they'd like, or extend their on-premises data centers. So there's a lot of different use cases that could fit your needs, using VMware Cloud. So that's kind of the gist of what VMware Cloud is. I know that was pretty quick, but of course, if you have any questions, just let me know. But right now I'm going to pass it actually over to Matt, and he's going to give you a quick overview about VMware HCX.
Great. Thanks, Phoebe. I can start my camera as well. There we go. Hope everyone's doing well today. As Phoebe said, here's an overview of HCX. This is a pretty common slide that we show all the time, and it shows HCX, or it shows the customer data center there on the left. You can see vCenter Server and HCX Connector, which is an appliance that's deployed on-prem. And then you've got some sort of connectivity, right? That goes to your cloud environment on the right. In this case, VMware Cloud SCDC, as Phoebe has been introducing to us. So there's appliances at both sites, and a pairing is stood up between those. And that is what just facilitates information sharing between sites, that shares information like data stores, compute configuration, network profiles. And as we look at HCX, we'll dive into this stuff a little bit more. I'm a network engineer. A lot of what I talk about will probably be a little bit slanted toward networking today. And if you've got networking specific questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. But the middle of this diagram here is the part I like to talk about a lot, because it's, connectivity and bandwidth are so crucial to HCX. And so we see here, with VMware Cloud on AWS, you've got a couple different options here to connect between your on-prem data center and your SDDC in AWS. So there's a direct connection, or you can even go over the internet. So we've got 100 megabit connection listed here. That's really the minimum internet speed we recommend for using HCX over the internet. This is a great scenario for proof of concept for workloads that maybe aren't as time sensitive, because you just can't guarantee performance over the internet. Whereas if you really need fast connectivity, reliable connectivity, even redundant connectivity, it's a little bit easier to accomplish that with the direct connection, although of course that's a little bit more expensive. But once you've got this whole scenario laid out, as you see here on the screen, this is obviously a simplified view of what HCX looks like, but this is a great high-level overview. And once you've got this set up, you've got your connectivity established, and you've got your interconnect established, you can start migrating VMs from one site to the other. And it's actually the setup might be the hardest part. Once you start migrating VMs, it's amazing how well this piece of software works. So these are the various HCX services. And so there are two license levels for HCX. And so we see kind of a mix of what's available between the two license levels here. But just starting on the top line here, all of these, the HCX interconnect, WAN optimization, vMotion, bulk migration, those are all included in the advanced license for HCX. So everybody gets these features. The hybrid interconnect is that interconnect I was just talking about. That's what actually facilitates the movement of VMs between one side and the other. WAN optimization is it's an optional appliance that can be deployed with HCX. It's going to add deduplication. It's going to just do compression and other network tweaks to make these migrations happen faster. It's sort of interesting to figure out where this should be used and where it shouldn't be. I would say it should be used in most cases, especially if your connectivity is 1 gigabits or less. And certainly if you're going over the internet or using something like a VPN, WAN optimization is a really important feature to use. If you want to migrate your workloads quickly, it does provide a great benefit there. As you scale up to the higher bandwidths, like if you've got 10 gigabit connectivity or higher to the cloud, that's where you get diminishing returns on WAN optimization. And so that's maybe a further conversation for later, but for most customers, especially if you're starting out with the POC, WAN optimization is a wonderful feature. The other two, vMotion migration and bulk migration, these are just two migration methods included in the HCX Advanced license, and vMotion is the vMotion you know and love. The difference is you're not vMotioning within your data center, you're vMotioning from your data center into the cloud, which is an amazing thing to see if you haven't seen it happen before. It blew me away the first time I saw it. Bulk migration is another way to move workloads to the cloud. It's a synchronous application, or it's a synchronous migration, meaning you can bulk migrate many VMs at one time, whereas vMotion is a serial migration, so that's a one at a time operation. So those are the differences, the main differences between those two. And as well, vMotion is obviously highly available, right? No downtime for that migration, whereas bulk, there is a downtime that's about equivalent to a reboot as the VM spins up in the cloud. I'll I'll talk about network extension service. It's in the bottom line. That's also included in the advanced license, so everybody can use this feature as well. This is also known as a layer 2 VPN. Just in HCX, we call this network extension. And so this feature goes quite nicely with vMotion if you're migrating VMs to the cloud. Obviously, their IP can't change, so you can stretch the port group that they're on, whether that's NSXT backed or DVS. You can stretch that port group into the cloud, so you can continue to have that layer 2 connectivity between your VMs. I'll talk about this feature a little bit more later. There's a lot to talk about there. The other two things that you see on the slide here, these are part of the enterprise license with HCX. So replication assisted vMotion it's another migration type. It's a combination of the bulk migration and the vMotion migration types that I just mentioned. So it really is the best of both worlds. So if you've got the enterprise license, this is a great way to move workloads. The way it works is it does that serial migration of all the VM's disks over to your cloud location. But then once that initial sync is finished, it does a vMotion switchover operation for every single VM. So that vMotion does happen serially. So that switchover happens one at a time, but you've been able to do the bulk of the migration with that sort of bulk migration service. And so this is, like I said, the best of both worlds. I see no reason not to use this in your environment if you've got the license for it. The last thing you see listed here, OS Assisted Migration Service. This is if you want to migrate workloads that are not VMware based. I don't know how much we're going to go into detail on this one today, unless maybe we get some questions on it. This is not, quite honestly, it's not a feature that I use a lot, but if you have a lot of non-VMware workloads or bare metal workloads, then OS Assisted Migration is a way that you can actually migrate those workloads into the cloud using VMware HCX.
All right. So we'll then just dive right into the demo with migrating the workloads to VMware Cloud on AWS as an example. So let me get situated here. All right. Okay. So we'll basically show you, in the environment what Matt just talked about regarding VMware HCX. So this right now, I'm in an on-premises data center. I have the HCX connector appliance already deployed beforehand because that takes a little bit of time. But essentially, you just download the OVA, and you could actually do that from VMware. I think it's called Customer Connect now, or the download site, or you could actually do it from VMware Cloud on AWS as well, which I can show you. So yeah, if you go here, this is VMware Cloud console. You can go to, I believe it was Tools or Development Center. Well, now I forget exactly where it is because it's a live demo, but you can also find it, find where to download the HCX connector appliance from here. But I will go back to the on-premises data center. So as you can see, this is the HCX connector appliance we already have here. And then you can go to the menu and go to HCX. So you can see the HCX UI as well. So essentially, if you remember from the slide, a couple of minutes ago with VMware HCX, essentially you have the HCX connector appliance on premises. You have a HCX cloud appliance in one of the VMware clouds, whichever one really that you're using. And it has a one-to-one pairing from that HCX appliance to the vCenter. So this one is connected to our on-premises vCenter, obviously. The HCX cloud in VMware Cloud on AWS environment is connected to that vCenter or that SDDC. And what you do is you create a site pairing. So we already have one, created for you, but essentially, as you can see, it goes from the on-premises to the VMware Cloud on AWS SDDC. I already have it connected, but if you want to, all you actually have to do is provide the remote site HCX URL and then the credentials that go with it. Now, one thing I really want to point out here is any HCX configuration or migration, network extension, anything you really want to do for the migration, you do it from the source site. So as you can see, we're trying to move a couple of VMs from on-premises to VMware Cloud on AWS. So that's why I am in the on-premises site and showing you everything from here. And we're actually going to do some network extension and whatnot. So first off, you create a site pairing. And once you have that, you can actually create service mesh. In the service mesh, essentially, you identify which service that you want to enable from the services that Matt showed you. And then it would deploy the appropriate appliances in both sites to be able to use those services. So for example, we can look at the VMware Cloud on AWS, interconnect that I created here. So you can view the topology, which I always thought this was cool. So you can see on the left side is the on-premises data center, and the right side is the VMware Cloud on AWS environment. And then you can see the appliances that the service mesh has deployed. So for example, we enabled WAN optimization. So it has a WAN opt appliance configured. We have the interconnect appliance. We have the network extension appliance. And as you can see, they deployed, or the service mesh deployed the appliances on the VMware Cloud on AWS as well. So this is done for you when you create a service mesh, and you could see these here. You could see the list of appliances as well, which is pretty cool. And it gives you the IP addresses and all of that it's using. So you would have that. So the service mesh, there's obviously more to it, and we could talk about it probably forever, but essentially you have these things called compute and network profiles that you can create beforehand. And that determines essentially the desired state. So the compute profile, you identify, where you want to deploy the appliances, the data stores where you want to apply, or which HCX services that you want to enable. Those things are all determined by the compute profile that you create and that you select when you create a service mesh. And that's basically similar for a network profile as well. So this is where you would give, IP ranges for management, for management network or vMotion network, vSphere replication network if you want. Any of the network that the appliances need to utilize, you determine or you define that from the network profiles. So I know that was really quick, but like Matt said, configuration is kind of the hardest part, but then once it's done, it's the actual migration is definitely a lot easier and is smoother. So you have the site pairing again. I just want to repeat, and then you have the service mesh, and this is where the actual migration then comes in. So we're going to actually extend the network. So Matt talked about how you can extend a port group from one site to the other. And so once this loads, what we're going to do is I have a distributed virtual port group in the on-premises data center that we will extend to VMware Cloud on AWS SDDC. So to create the network, you select the source network. So again, do everything on the source site. I created one for this demo. So first you have to choose a service mesh, which I will. And then, of course, the one I want is not showing. Let's see. I don't know why
Which
only
network
mine is
were
showing.
you trying to extend, Phoebe?
It's the distributed virtual port group. Did I make the segment? Yeah, it's not showing here. It's only showing the network.
I think
and SXT
that
segment.
I think our configuration right now is only NSXT networks right now. I mean, you can.
Oh, really?
You have to just adjust the service mesh configuration, right?
Oh, when did we change that? No
great question.
worries.
Yeah,
it's fine.
If you want to
We'll just
extend
do
like
this
that,
one.
VLAN 10 or 14, like we have VMs there. We can migrate if you need. So
okay, yep. Let's do this one. I know I do this one sometimes. So Well, yeah, so select the network. Yeah, this one, as Matt said, right now is only showing the NSXT networks segments to extend, but you can do the other ones as well, like distributed port group. Um, just not right now. All right, and then one thing I wanted to show you here is the mobility optimized networking. So this is pretty new to HCX and is available for VMware Cloud on AWS specifically at the moment between all the different VMware clouds. So essentially what this does is it enables local egress. So what used to happen is if you extend the network from on-premises to VMware Cloud on AWS, then the default gateway for all of those VMs on that network used to stay on premises. So even if your virtual machines are in the cloud, in VMware Cloud, and they want to, let's say, talk to VMs in the same VMware Cloud, but on a different segment, then it would like travel all the way back to on-prem and then go all the way back to VMware Cloud. So this mobility optimized networking, it would allow you essentially to use the compute gateway or the NSX tiers 1 router in the VMware Cloud for the VMs to use that as a default gateway instead of doing hairpinning. Matt, did you just say you have some slides you want to show on Mon, or?
I have a visual if you want me to show it
Yeah,
real quick.
I think
it's a
visual helps.
complicated to, yeah, let me
Yeah,
start
let me
sharing.
stop
One sec.
share. Yeah, as I started explaining, I'm like, I feel like I need a picture for this. So
One moment. Okay. Start my video while I'm talking at least. So you can see there's a visual here of just what network extension looks like. And so there's theoretical blue and purple network. And on the left-hand side, there's a customer site here. And then we've got 2 networks extended to the cloud with 2 VMs connected to them on the cloud side as well. So there's 2 customer side VMs, there's 2 cloud-based VMs, and there's 2 networks extended. And so this is really the minimum sort of scenario you need for Mon to even be helpful. If you only have 1 network extended, and unless you, like Phoebe said, local egress is a separate problem, but hairpinning is the thing that a lot of people want to avoid. And I've got a slide here that shows that. So just basic networking states here that these VMs, to communicate with VMs that are on other segments that are outside of their local network, they have to go through their default gateway. And their default gateway is still on-prem. So you can imagine if there's just 30 milliseconds of latency between each of these sites, the round trip between just VM1 and VM2 communicating is going to add 60 milliseconds of latency. So for really time sensitive workloads, that can be problematic. For others, you may not notice it, but generally this is just something you want to avoid because it's adding increased bandwidth across your whatever interconnect you have that is unnecessary. So what Mon does is it spins up another it enables another gateway in the cloud. And there's a lot of technical details beyond how this happens. There's some NSXT magic that happens here to actually enable this. But you can see the path between those 2 clouds when Mon is actually enabled is it's much shorter. And so you're going to get that intra-cloud latency, which is probably 10 milliseconds or less, depending on how your where your workloads are placed. And then like Phoebe said, there's local egress. So internet bound traffic, if you choose, will exit through the cloud provider's internet gateway versus having to go all the way on-prem. But you do have flexibility in how you choose to configure that if you want. So I'll stop there, Phoebe, and you can continue.
No, all good. No, I think that was nice. I'm like, this is kind of getting confusing as I explained.
Yeah.
So thank you. All right, so we'll go back now. All you have to do is give the gateway IP or for the subnet. We did 14, right? So I think it's
Yes.
192.168.14.1/24. So that's it. I'm gonna click submit, and it should start. So what HCX does is when you give that gateway, it looks for that subnet in the destination site to see if there already exists a segment that uses that subnet. If it doesn't have one, it creates one for you with this weird naming, which I'll probably show you in a bit. If it does have a segment already that uses the same subnet, then it actually just connects those two together. It doesn't create another one for you. Then, you would have overlapping subnets with two different segments. So you don't want that. So HCX does that for you. It should come up in a bit. And all right. So as you can see, the network extension has started. You can see the progress or the status here. Doesn't really take too long, actually. And then we enabled mobility optimized networking. So you can see that label MON that appears right here for that. And actually, you won't see any details until this is done configuring. Now, if we look at the VMware Cloud on AWS environment, we can go to the SDDC, which was our destination. You can go to networking and security. And this is where you will see if HCX has created a segment for you, which it should have done by now. Yes, perfect. So you go to segments and then you can see it. I didn't have a pre-created segment with the same subnet or anything. So HCX created one for you. It starts with L2E all the time with the underscore, and then it takes the name from the segment that you're extending, and it adds a bunch of different numbers after that. But for now, it's still being created, the network extension. So I refreshed and perfect. So as you can see, it will have a label that says MON as well for mobility optimized networking. And the difference really is that it's routed, which means, right, again, what Matt showed you in the picture, it will use the compute gateway in the VMware Cloud on AWS SDDC as the default gateway for the VMs here. But if you extend the network without mobility optimized networking enabled, obviously it won't have that little label, but also it will say disconnected because at that point, it doesn't have an interface connected to the compute gateway. It's going to use the on-premises router as the default gateway. So this is kind of the main difference, at least from a UI perspective, that you can see. So it is almost done. I'm just going to refresh. And then I'm going to make sure the VMs are, we have some VMs on that one. I just moved them. So let's just check. So VLAN 14 Linux is the one that we extended. I put like two VMs that I've pre-created before. They're just Linux VMs, very small, just for migration. So we're going to try to move these two. So I'll go back to HCX and go to network extension, make sure it's done. Matt, is there anything I'm forgetting here you want to talk about with network extension?
I think that's it. I mean, I while we're waiting, I can kind of give my guidance here, right? So, and actually, I probably have a slide on this as well that we can cover it. We can cover it as well, but I'll just maybe explain how it works while we're waiting for this to complete. Well, it's done. So I'll do this very briefly. It's all appliance based, right? So a lot of HCX accomplishes WAN optimization, network extension, its interconnect is all done via different appliances. And they're all, while there's a good white paper on achieving high availability with HCX, there are these applications or these appliances are singletons. And so as a network engineer, I'm taught to sort of avoid those scenarios where there's a single point of failure. So in this case, I don't think that's necessarily needed. But what I do recommend is that if you are extending layer 2, is that you put some guardrails around it and really sort of say, we're going to do this migration. We're going to extend layer 2 for a month. We're going to be very careful during that month. We're going to migrate our workloads. And then when we're done, we're going to take down the layer 2 extension because I have seen problems arise from long-term layer 2 stretches, and we can talk about that a little bit later if you want.
No, sounds good. Yeah, and for network extension, the example that, the demo I'm showing you here today is from an on-premises data center to VMware Cloud on AWS. Of course, if you have some kind of site pairing and, service mesh configured between different VMware clouds, you can extend networks between the VMware clouds as well. I think, Matt, you might have played around with that recently a little bit. I don't remember. But we'll move on to migration. So click migrate. That part was pretty self-explanatory. But here you would choose the sites, of course, where you want to move to. So once it loads, we will choose the one from the on-premises data center to the VMware Cloud on AWS. There we go, that one. And then it will show you the, the virtual machines that obviously that you have in your inventory on premises. So you can filter by name if you'd like. So I'm going to select the 2 VMs that I've created for this demo. And here you could actually give a name to this group of VMs that you've chosen to migrate. And that in HCX terms is called mobility group. So this right now is, I think, only available in VMware Cloud on AWS from all the different VMware clouds. But of course, who knows what the future will bring. But for now, this is mobility group. We'll just call it TAM webinar mobility group. And one thing about the mobility group that's kind of cool is if you have a realized network inside and, you do all your application dependency mapping and, create applications within the realized network inside, you could actually export all of those and import them into HCX migration tab like that you just saw as mobility groups. You can use APIs to do that, or you can use this. There's a VMware Fling out there for VRNI and HCX integration. Here, it's by Martin. It works really well. So, but again, VMware Flings, they're not supported right by VMware support or anything. So use with caution and test it out with your non-production workloads and all, but it's actually really nice, works well. It uses APIs in the backend, so it's not anything new. He just made it easier for you to use instead of you having to write your own APIs. So this you can definitely check out, but for now you choose the compute container, which compute resource pool is the only thing you can deploy to in VMware Cloud on AWS. And then destination storage is a workload data store. And then we'll do a vMotion for this one, see what happens. You can choose destination folder and all that. There are different options that are available if you want to retain MAC address or upgrade VMware tools as a part of the migration, things like that. There's a lot of different options to that. So I'll click validate, but if you actually just click go, it's gonna validate anyway. So you don't have to, freak out or something if you just click go. So I'm gonna click it and I will pause. All right. So here's the mobility group, right? You have the name that I given, but by the way, if you don't give a name to the mobility group, HCX is gonna make its own name up, including today's date and time. I think it has a timestamp on it or something. I can't remember right now, but yeah, it'll give a name for it if you don't have one. Now you have the 2 virtual machines that are moving. If you see, it tells you, the configuration details you've chosen for the destination site. It gives you, which network it's moving to, right? This is the VLAN 14 Linux on-prem, and then this is the network extension segment, right, that we've created, or HCX has created, really, there. So it'll go, and this has started. So it'll take a little bit. It really depends on the connectivity, the size of the VM in terms of how long a migration would take. This shouldn't take too long, but so we don't have to sit here and watch it. I'm actually going to pass it over to Matt so he can talk a little bit more about, using HCX for multi-cloud. So
Sure.
I will stop sharing.
Sure. We'll come back to that in a moment, and we can see that that finalized migration as well. And we did get a question about layer 2 extension. And so I've got a few slides that I'll share, and we'll get into that topic a little bit more. I just preface that with some of this is Matt's opinion, and some of this is just has to do with what level of risk you're comfortable with taking. So let's get into that, and I'll share my screen. Just a moment. I do have just a couple slides here to run through, and these are all relevant to what we're talking about here. So new features in HCX is what I've picked as my favorite features in 4.1 and 4.2, which was just released. Hopefully we'll see in just a moment those real-time migration estimates. So these migrations that Phoebe's running, after they run for a bit, they will give an estimate of how long they'll take to migrate. Everybody wants to know how long it's going to take to migrate something. That's not always something that's easy to figure out, but once a migration's in flight, it does give an estimate. And that was just for bulk migrations, but now it's been expanded to the other migration types. Migration over IPsec and SD-WAN, I'll go into this in detail as well, but this is a new feature in 4.2. So prior to 4.2, migrations over IPsec VPN or SD-WAN were not supported, and actually suffered from some severe performance issues, just because we're taking an HCX tunnel, putting it in a VPN, that causes all kinds of complications from a network perspective. But 4.2's had some enhancements. It plays nicely now with VPNs and SD-WAN. Talk about that in a moment. Additional visibility and diagnostics. Phoebe just showed us that event log that we could see as she was refreshing the screen there. So there's a nice event log as migrations take place, so you can see what's happening and even potentially diagnose issues as they come up. Also, there's added visibility into that network extension service, and we'll take a look at this in a moment once these VMs are migrated. But we can see a lot of statistics about the layer 2 extension, which MAC addresses are seen on each site, how much bandwidth is being transferred across that. And also relevant to network extension topics is this in-service upgrade for network extension appliances. I mentioned everything is appliance-based, and these are single appliances that provide this layer 2 stretch, and any upgrade that happens with HCX, the appliances get upgraded as well. And so now there's an option within HCX to do this in-service upgrade for your network extension appliances, and that reduces the amount of downtime that you're going to see to just a matter of seconds. So there'll be a brief outage as the switchover happens between the old and new appliance. So you lose a little bit of traffic across that layer 2 stretch, but it'll be minimal. So still something you should probably schedule a maintenance window for, but it's really, they've improved the upgrade time on those. So it's very brief. Don't think we need to talk about that. And I work a lot with Google Cloud VMware Engine. I guess we can just highlight here how this picture is very similar to the one Phoebe showed as well. The only difference, actually one of the differentiators between VNC on AWS and the other cloud providers is that VNC on AWS does allow that public IP connectivity via HCX. The other cloud providers typically want that over either their direct connection like a Google interconnect or Cloud VPN. So, depending on which cloud provider you're going to use, you still need to do a little bit of homework in terms of what connectivity they support. But, allowing VPN as part of this mix really does open up this the possibility to do at least proof of concept migrations to many, many people. I will go into layer 2 extension a bit more in a second, but I did want to highlight this new bit of documentation that's been released in conjunction with our support for migrations using HCX over VPN or SD-WAN. And what these have been released as is what we're just calling a minimum underlay requirements. So whether you're using VPN or SD-WAN or something else, it really doesn't matter. As long as you can meet these requirements, HCX will work and will be supported. So there's slightly different bandwidth requirements and packet loss requirements for the different migration types. So you'll have to just do a test and make sure that you can accommodate these requirements. And you'll see the MTU there. That's when you're using a technology like VPN and encapsulation, where you're basically you're encapsulating, adding encapsulation to each packet. The amount of space for payload you have shrinks, and so really the minimum MTUs 1150 bytes, 1150 bytes. Most people should be able to accommodate that, but MTU issues can be difficult to diagnose. And so really pay some attention here to your environment and make sure that you can meet these requirements before you attempt migrations over something like a VPN tunnel. I'll illustrate this point I made briefly. We don't have to stay here very long, but here's what it looks like. This is an approximation, so this maybe is not 100% technically accurate just in terms of what the packet looks like, because there's some technical details that we just don't want to share, honestly. But this is an overview of what it looks like when you take the bottom packet shows normal HCX encapsulation with network extension encapsulation, which gives us that layer 2 stretch, shoved inside of an IPsec packet. And you can see how much encapsulation is needed here. Like all of these white things are just added headers to your packet, and then there's a trailer as well. And so you're losing room in the actual packet to transmit data for your migration. So this is a good visual just to understand what happens when you think, oh, we'll just spin up a VPN, it'll be fine. Sometimes it's slightly more complicated than that, but the good news now is that this is a possibility. One more slide on multi-cloud connectivity before we talk about layer 2 extension, and we can look at how we do this in our lab today. We do use Megaport. It's what is referred to as a network as a service provider. I put this slide up here because we like their service, not because we endorse Megaport necessarily, but there are other providers available to you if you have to look and see what's available to you, obviously. So if you're in Equinix, Equinix offers a very similar technology. Other co-location facilities probably do as well. Megaport has other competitors. I'm just not as familiar with them. But this was pulled straight from the Megaport documentation. This is very similar to how we provide multi-cloud connectivity in our lab. So if you look at the bottom of this diagram, the very bottom circle would just be like your on-prem network connectivity. And you create a cross connect into Megaport, and then Megaport spins up what they call their Megaport Cloud Router. And this is a software appliance. And so if you can get that connectivity up, so you get a cross connect up to Megaport and configure perhaps BGP peering or some other routing with their router, at that point, it's very, very simple to connect to the different clouds. They all have different nuances in the way they want a connection to be built. You can see Azure requires this Q and Q connection. There's variations between AWS and Google and Oracle. They all do things slightly differently. And Megaport and these other network as a service providers will abstract a lot of those difficulties for you. They'll allow you to connect to these clouds simply and easily. It's all API driven. So you could automate these connections, bring them up and down as you need to. But that MCR, that Megaport Cloud Router, provides connectivity between the clouds and also to your on-prem environment. So you can even move data between the clouds potentially if you needed to do that. So I'll get into layer 2 extension just briefly, and then we can look at some of these things that I've talked about in our lab environment. Network engineers are just a nervous bunch, and I can't speak for all of them, but I can speak for a lot of them that I've talked to. We get very nervous about extending layer 2. I think the reason why most of us are really afraid of it is because we've seen the just sheer destruction that a broadcast loop can cause. I've seen a spanning tree issue take down an entire hospital for several days, and so we're not quite talking about that scale. But if you were not very careful about extending layer 2, you can introduce these broadcast loops into your environment. If you're not aware of that's even a possibility, you could have a real problem on your hands. So you never, in HCX just simply doesn't have a loop prevention mechanism like some network appliances do. So the onus is on you to be very careful here to not introduce a loop. So we can see some other, potential issues, MTU complications, the default gateway single site, which is that hairpinning problem that Mon solves, fate sharing, just meaning that if you have a problem at one site, now you may have introduced it into the other. So there's some real issues to consider here and think about. Reasons for extending layer 2, and there are some great ones, exactly what we're talking about today: migration, data center exit, disaster recovery. And so the difference there is a migration and a data center exit and a disaster recovery exercise are usually time-bounded exercise. So you shouldn't have to extend layer 2 beyond that, and that will just reduce your risk. And so when I say don't extend layer 2 for a long period of time, that is my opinion. And so you may not have that risk concern at all. You may have really talented people on staff who understand the risks, and they say, we're good, we're going to extend layer 2 forever. That's your choice. I would also just say that HCX I see as a migration tool. So if you really wanted to extend layer 2 for a long period of time, NSX has that capability as well. It is a networking tool. That is probably what I choose for a longer term stretch. But again, your mileage may vary there, and there is just some opinion that goes into making that decision and some research into your own environment, what you're comfortable with. There are of course many alternatives to extending layer 2.
Hey, Matt.
Yep.
Sorry, 1 second. There's a question, a related question
Sure.
So Richard's asking, can you share an example of how a loop could be unintentionally created with extending layer 2?
Sure. Let me see if I can draw. Let's see if this works. I have a diagram that shows it. It just may take me a moment to pick it up. Oops. I'm not good enough at Zoom to try to draw. Let me see if I can describe this scenario. So basically, an unintentional layer 2 loop. HCX does support extending networks to multiple sites. So if you had 2 cloud providers and you extended the same network to each site, that kind of forms a V formation, and that's supported. That's fine. There's no real way to form a loop there. But if you were to, HCX would let you extend the network also between the cloud providers if you chose to, then your V becomes a triangle. And broadcast traffic has no time to live like an IP packet does. An IP packet will decrement its time to live over several hops, and if it's never able to make it to its index destination, the packet is dropped. Broadcast and multicast traffic does not. If the loop is introduced, the broadcast traffic will simply circle the loop. There's no way to stop it. Broadcast traffic is used all the time in networking. So eventually it turns into it could become a broadcast flood. So that's what you want to avoid. Hopefully I answered that question. And if I can bring up that diagram, I'll pull it up. It's just on another site. So, but alternatives, I see a lot of people extend layer 2 because they just don't understand the alternatives, or they're perceived to be too difficult. Routed connectivity, right? So this is how the cloud is built, on routed connectivity. And the native cloud networks, except for some of the major cloud networks, right? AWS, GCP, Azure, they don't have layer 2 semantics. There is no broadcast traffic in those networks. And so to get that done, we extend NSX and use NSXT in the cloud to emulate some of these semantics so that we can extend layer 2. But we are sort of shoving a round peg into a square hole there. It works just fine, but it does complicate your network. So a good way to avoid this is just if you can schedule maintenance time for your migrations and change the IP, which is something that is supported by HCX during bulk migration. You can simply change the IP during migration. That's a totally feasible alternative here. Also, using things like DNS and not relying on IP addresses will just make your migration easier. It's much simpler to change DNS entry that many hosts consume rather than going host by host and having to update IP addresses. So that's a practice that you can follow that will just make your migration life easier. And I'm going to talk about this topic and a lot more along with one of my colleagues in a VMworld session that's coming up. So if you want more details here, you can attend that session or just reach out. It's a topic I'm happy to talk about pretty much anytime. And the rest, I think we've already covered here. So let's take a look in our environment. I'll stop sharing for a moment. Any other questions that came up that we need to answer here? Said, once you introduce multiple paths between source and destination on L2, you might introduce a loop. It's possible. So it's there. If you look in the HCX network extension documentation, it's very clear about what they support and what they don't. and it's very clear that only one layer 2 extension technology is supported at a time. So if you extend layer 2 with network extension, only use network extension with HCX. If you decide to extend layer 2 with NSX, only use NSX layer 2 extension. Mixing those two technologies together could also introduce a loop because they're not aware of each other. And I will get this stuff out of my way and share my screen. And let's see if these migrations have finished. They should have. Bear with me.
They're done.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Those are done. And they were, I'm not in VMC right now, but we can do some connectivity tests there. But let's just highlight one of these other quick features I spoke about where we were talking about additional visibility into layer 2 connections. So I believe if we browse into our, so basically I've gone into our service mesh here that is connected to VMC on AWS, and I'm looking at our appliance list. The network extension interconnect here, we can see there's some tunnel details here. That's the link between the two appliances on each site. If we click on network extension details, this is that visibility enhancement I was speaking about. I'll let this pull up real quick. Click on show more details. And then we get some nice visibility into, transmit and receive rate, packet rates, and then the remote MAC addresses and the local MAC addresses. So this is the kind of troubleshooting information I want to be able to see as a network engineer. So if like something is not working, I want to be able to see what MAC addresses are known on both sides. And that's super helpful when it comes to troubleshooting these things. Let me bring up our Megaport portal. And that is going to be just in a different browser. So bear with me again for just one moment. I just wanted to show you all how we have basically our lab configured. There's a lot of different ways to do this. But let me get logged in and then I will show my screen.
Hey, Matt, we have a question about lags. Yep. And it's at least with Azure. I'm not familiar with Azure VMware Solution. I don't know if you know the answer to this.
On-prem lags, I think we're going to need some clarification there. Is he talking about like link aggregation, like bundling multiple ports together? So Brandon, I guess we'll have to get some clarification there. I don't know that I can answer that one without more information because a lag configured within VMware, I think we'll have to do some research there because I'm not familiar with that particular restriction, but so a physical lag between VMware and the switch, I don't know why that would cause a problem with HCX off the top of my head, but I'll have to get back to you on that one, Brandon. So this is our Megaport configuration. So we don't have to go into great detail here, but you can see we're connected in our lab to a few different clouds, and we have a cross connect that comes into Megaport. So this, if we need to add or remove connectivity into these clouds, we just come in here and click a few buttons. It's really quite easy. And then once we do that, we have some amazing capabilities here in terms of troubleshooting. So normally this is something that I'm used to, like logging into a router and switch and like pulling information, and it's sometimes a painful process. We can look in here in our Megaport portal and see all the routes from all the different clouds, including our on-prem routes. And it's very easy to diagnose any sort of issues or routing problems, where one subnet is. We can see as new subnets come in via advertisements. And so this makes my life so much easier. If we think about that picture I showed just a moment ago with the connections to all those clouds, doing that by hand without a tool like Megaport would have taken me weeks or months to establish all that cloud connectivity. They also have quite good documentation on cloud connectivity and how it works. That's where I just showed one of their diagrams. Let's see if I can pull it back up. now it's under here, common connectivity scenarios. So I love this level of documentation here where they give you connectivity scenarios, multi-cloud connectivity scenarios, and they walk you through all kinds of different scenarios, and you just find the one that works best for you, that has the right level of redundancy and that fits into your budget, and then you stand up the connection, and you've got a wonderful solution there for connecting to the cloud. So what else should we show, Phoebe? I had a couple other ideas, but of course now they're escaping me that I'm sitting here blabbing. So,
No.
and honestly, I just we're almost out of time, but I guess I was curious what folks on the call might want to see. What have we missed? What would they like to be shown?
Yeah, if you have any specific use cases that you wanted to achieve, you could ask about anything really. I think we have like 5, maybe 10 minutes we want to stay on.
Yeah, no problem. You easily have 10 minutes, 10, 15, even if you want it. No problem.
Because I don't know if there, I have some automation stuff that I've pulled together for HCX that I could go through, Phoebe. I don't know if that's useful, or if you want to show, is there anything now that these workloads are migrated to VMC that you want to show there, or?
I could show, on VMware Cloud on AWS that they're there, but nah, I feel like it's not
Did
as
get
interesting.
another question that came in about a solution for an untagged VLAN that they wanted to extend the network for. Every network, the network extension requirements, support, NSXT segments and distributed port groups, and I think even standard port groups on the source side, right? Does that sound correct, Phoebe? I think that's correct.
I think so, but I would stick with distributed port group.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're using standard port groups, then that's another conversation. But distributed port groups and NSXT segments are supported to extend. So if that's an existing port group in your VMware environment, you should be able to extend it with HCX as long as it meets all the requirements. And I know people don't love reading documentation, but the documentation for HCX is really quite good here. It really specifically spells out what is supported and what isn't supported for network extension. So before you plan on using that, there's really no better solution than just read the documentation. It's not long. So is it possible to use HCX between NSX-V to cloud network? Yes, it is. That's supported today. What is the limit or max on VM migrations? I think we'd have to pull up the configuration maximums for those because I think they've changed recently.
Yeah, I think they changed with 4.2, so we're gonna have to pull that up. I'll look for the website real quick.
Okay, so Phoebe will get back to that. That's on that. See if any other questions came in, and I guess to the other organizers, if we want to get back to Brendan, will we have his contact information or should we share ours with him so we can try to answer that question for him?
Oh, I gave him our email.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So for limit, max on VM migrations. Okay, I could share this real quick. Let me share my screen. Y'all can see it. If I could find the share button. Okay, so this is for HCX 4.2, which was just released. What is it, like 3 weeks ago, Matt? Yeah, something very recent.
Yep.
So you can see the migrations here. So concurrent HCX bulk migrations is 200 per service mesh, by the way. So these numbers are per service mesh. vMotion, again, there is serial. So here it just says 1, but it doesn't mean just 1. It's just done serially. I think that's the same for cold migration. And then there's replication assisted or RAV. It's 200 concurrent per service mesh. So I think the limits have increased from this, and you could see other maximums as well. You just have to go to the VMware configuration maximums, and you should be able to see all of this. I hope this answers your question. But
we got one more
question from Mark.
Yep. Mark asks, I'm interested in setting up an isolated recovery test environment for DR testing. I'd like to set it up through automation, keep it alive for 2 to 3 days, then tear it down, and keep all content and traffic fully isolated from production, both on-prem and in the cloud. So without more details, I think that's a feasible approach. It's gonna, if you want to do it all through automation, it's going to depend on everything you need to automate. And if you just want to automate the HCX part, or if you want to automate the whole kit and caboodle. From an automation perspective, I've used both the Power CLI HCX commandlets, as well as there is a Terraform provider. It's a community Terraform provider for HCX. I've used that to configure my local HCX. So the Terraform provider can do all the setup that you need for HCX. So configuring network profiles and compute profiles and setting up the service mesh and site pairing, and even network extension can all be done with this Terraform provider. It's a community provider, so it's not officially supported by VMware. And I know there was a little bit of a lag getting it updated for 4.2. I actually haven't tested again in 4.2, but I think it's been updated. So if you are a Terraform user, you want to use that for automation, check that out. It's written and maintained by a VMware employee. It's like a Fling. It's not officially supported. So your mileage may vary there a little bit. But Mark, again, if you want to reach out with more questions on that, that is a question that's hard to answer in a short period of time. So there's a lot to unpack there. But generally speaking, the tools that I've used for automating HCX, Terraform's great for setting it up, and then Power CLI is great for actually doing the tasks, right? Setting up migrations and firing them off. So great.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Mark, you could definitely reach out through your account rep. And Thomas, what are the pros and cons of using HCX versus migrating on-prem workloads to AWS or Azure? I can start, and then Matt, if you want to add on to anything.
Sure.
So if you're going to native cloud, obviously, I think it depends on the workloads, right, that you have and the applications, because if you're going from a vSphere VM, let's very specifically, to a native workload, any public cloud, really, you might have to refactor them. Like, for example, you need to change them to EC2 instances and all of that fun stuff. So it does take a lot of, time and effort into, refactoring your applications to match the native cloud, which is sort of, the idea behind VMware Cloud, right? It's that you can migrate your workloads as they are as quickly as you can. And HCX is just a tool to help you get there even faster in terms of migration. Matt, did you want to add anything else there?
I think it also it depends on how much you want that operational consistency between your existing environment and the cloud. If you're using the VMware Cloud offerings and the different public cloud providers, and you're using HCX to migrate workloads there, then that's all going to feel very familiar, especially if you're using a tool like vMotion. And some of these other tools that are used to migrate workloads are a simple conversion, like we used to do with a P to V conversion. It's sort of a V to V conversion. It doesn't offer near the capability. I haven't seen anything that offers everything HCX offers in terms of, vMotion and layer 2 extension and just all the sort of quality of life features that are there in HCX. I'm not aware of any other migration tool that has those. So in the end, I think there's an advantage to using HCX if you're trying to migrate to the cloud with minimal effort and the fastest way with the highest uptime. But again, it just depends on what you need to accomplish. If you can schedule an outage for a month and move all your workloads to the cloud, then that's great. It's just not a position most people are in.
Yeah, and I guess that's sort of related to John's question here. It's why HCX over NSXT. He's talking about going to AVS, the Azure VMware Solution, and have been told to use HCX. First, I think HCX comes with AVS anyway, right? I'm not sure. It does with VMC on AWS, which is what it
comes with
right
just
now.
the advanced license, yeah, but it's included in the solution.
And I mean, there's definitely more advantages to using HCX over just NSXT. HCX itself creates that VPN tunnel between the two sites for you. NSXT, I would think right now with AVS, I think it only supports layer 3 VPN? I don't remember. I don't know with ABS specifically. I don't know, Matt,
What was
if
your
you
question?
know.
Sorry.
It just, why would you use HCX over NSXT for migration?
I mean, they're really two different tools. I mean,
Yeah.
HCX is primarily a migration tool that integrates in with NSXT. If you migrated every single workload you ever needed to migrate, you wouldn't need HCX any further, unless you were using it for a layer 2 extension, in which case I would say, why? Why do you have a long-term extension? Can you get rid of that? Can you migrate that to NSXT instead? But I know many customers are quite happy with it and they run it perpetually. It's their solution for layer 2 extension. And if you're happy with that, I see no issue with it. Apart from, we've already discussed the issues I see, but everybody's free to do as they wish. So.
Yeah, and the HCX, again, like Matt said, is a migration tool. So it gives you the different options where you can migrate. It maps your source and destination together. So there's a lot of things that HCX offers for migration specifically that NSXT doesn't natively do. In that sense, you would have to basically do all of that legwork, like it just vMotioning VMs, for example, right? Or doing bulk migration. So they're two different tools. And then I guess there's another question from Marcel. So you have mentioned that HCX network extension reuse existing segment if IP subnet on the destination site is the same. Yes, that is true. Can it be disabled in multi-tenant environment where tenants can have same private subnet? I would need to know more about how that multi-tenant is set up to answer that.
Yeah, if you've got each tenant connected to its own T1 router, Phoebe, you showed us when you do that with network extension, you have to choose the T1 router that network extension connects to, right? So but yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
It depends on how you're achieving multi-tenancy, right?
Yeah, because for example, like VMware Cloud on AWS, it's not like you can create additional tier 1 gateways and, separate out your tenants or something like that. So it would depend. It just depends on the multi-tenant environment, exactly what that means, because it's different for every customer.
Yep. I think that's just a scenario where I would say, test and in a sort of simulate that in a lab or some other environment and test it and see. And if needed, we can, that's a question we can take back to some other folks who might be able to, who have specific experience with multi-tenant usage with HCX. One HCX mesh can be used to migrate VMs from multiple clusters and virtual data centers. So it's a service mesh per cluster. That's the limitation. So you would need one service mesh per cluster. Those could, you could have many clusters at the source site and one on the destination, but it's a one-to-one relationship between, a cluster on-prem and a cluster at the destination site. Anything I missed there, Phoebe?
No, I mean, you could select the data center you could select the data center level instead of the actual host cluster when you create the compute profile, but it's still one-to-one. I think that's.
Maybe I mistook. I mean, there is I thought it was per cluster. I did double check, but I think that was the case.
Oh, it might be just for the appliance. I think I see what you mean. I might be
in terms of creating a service mesh. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought you could select the data center, but yeah, we can check. Oh, we could check now. Let me see. Where's my environment? Let me share this screen. All right, let's just try creating one. I can try compute profile. Well, let's just do test and select services. You could select the data center instead of specifying which cluster.
I think it will deploy it. Maybe the problem is it deploys an appliance per cluster. So you have one interconnect, but you still we'll get clarification there, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I know that there is.
We can test this out.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's certainly possible, right? There's many ways to accomplish this. It gets down into the nitty-gritty details of setting up your network profiles and all of these appliances are deployed and just making sure that you have the resources and everything in place to support that, right? So it's just a little bit of a planning exercise.
Cool. Well, I know we're about 10 minutes past, so if I don't think we have any more outstanding questions, so I'll just throw it back to Andy to close for us.
Yeah. Well, Phoebe and Matt, not only was this great content today, but you two upped the bar for your audio video setups for all those coming behind you. Pretty impressive what you guys have there. What camera is that, Matt, that you have? Especially yours is especially sharp. You're on mute.
Yeah, VMware's been kind to us since we make so many videos. This is a Sony ZV-1.
Okay. Boy, it's just really, really sharp.
I wish you had somebody nicer to look at with this great picture, so I apologize.
Well, I get it. Hey, and so thanks so much for your time. You know, I was talking to a customer earlier this morning, and they were describing HCX as this amalgamation of the VMware Converter, vSphere Application, SRM, vMotion, with a bunch of clever features to bring them all together. And you both did a great job of demonstrating this flexibility for us today. So thank you for your time. As we mentioned at the beginning, this presentation was recorded, and your TAM will make that available to you. And please do join us next month when we'll be looking at SaltStack. And so we look forward to seeing you on October 21st for that session. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.